Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 62 of the Memorial Memo, KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Phoenix Stevens. As always, I am excited for this episode. Just wrapped up a really fun weekend in Morgantown, West Virginia. I'll talk about that a little bit. Of course, the West Virginia game itself, how Kentucky ended up beating the Mountaineers to punch their ticket to the Sweet 16 for the first time in a decade, and of course, how Kentucky can keep its season alive against one seed Texas in the Sweet 16. So I want to immediately just jump to kind of just my weekend, right? And actually, no. Before I even get into that part of what I did in Morgantown, I do want to say yesterday, obviously. If you saw on Twitter, I did post that we were originally going to do this episode yesterday. I was anticipating at this moment in time basically arriving in Fort Worth like right now. For reasons and circumstances out of my control, out of KSR's control, I won't be able to go to Fort Worth. I'll still provide all the coverage you all could ever want from here. It just sucks I won't be there in person. I was really looking forward to that. And before anyone even wants to get the speculation started, it is nothing like UK Athletics is not doing anything weird, right? It's just, again, reasons out of my control, KSR's control, that I cannot go. So, again, it sucks, but again, I'll be glad to provide coverage from a far route, on the television over here, just like you all will as well. So I just wanted to preface and say that because I know yesterday I posted that we were going to do this episode, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, why we're doing this on Thursday instead of Wednesday. What's going on? That's basically what happened there. But I do want to talk about West Virginia. So first of all, just this. Let's just talk about the town of Morgantown, right? Just everything there was to break down about that. First of all, of all the cities I've been fortunate enough to travel to in my time doing this, Morgantown, the city itself, is kind of meh, I think. I don't people always go to oh, there's not anything to do. I just don't know how great of a city it is in general. I do, it does kind of remind me of when I was back home out in McLean County, and it's like that. It's just like McLean County with fast food restaurants, right? Where I'm from, you only have a Subway, and of course, the little local places, but that's really all you've got. And it literally just felt like, oh, this is my home, but a bit more urbanized, a bit more of a city. But other than that, there wasn't really a whole lot to Morgantown. Now, Hope Coliseum itself, the place where West Virginia plays, I freaking love that venue, right? It's a big concrete dome. I like the look at it. From outside, I think it's very aesthetically pleasing. On the inside, it's beautiful. Shout out to Mountaineer fans, by the way, for that game. So I know for West Virginia's first round game against Miami of Ohio, they had a record 13,504 fans. Program record. They've had more for men's basketball, but program record for women's basketball, 13,504 fans in the arena. And I think there was a little bit less for the Kentucky game, and I think part of that is the delayed time of figuring out when that game was. Kids are getting out of school, around that kind of time. So I guess I get it, but it was still pretty full. If it was 13,504 for the record-breaking crowd, I bet it was right at 13,000 for the Kentucky game. And, of course, as we all know, Kentucky ends up pulling out the win and beats West Virginia 74-73, right? Kentucky got out to – it was a good start for Kentucky, a good start in the third quarter for Kentucky. But otherwise, West Virginia made their runs. They fought back. And, at times when you're sitting there thinking, well, Kentucky should win this game by 20, it's all of a sudden a 1-point game, right? I thought it was about as fun. If you were a neutral observer and you didn't have skin in the game, unlike us, right? Obviously rooting for UK. If you were just watching that game you know, how we'll watch these men's games tonight and the women's and men's games this weekend. Like, it was just a fun game. Kentucky is this big, long team that's going to get you at their size, right? Whereas West Virginia, you know, they're going to press, they're small, they're quick. Like, it was just two completely different styles of play. And you saw, you know, Clara Strack, one of the best centers in the country. Tony Morgan, one of the best point guards, right? Jordan Harrison for West Virginia, like one of the nation's elite defenders. You just saw all these people, Kenny Brooks and Mark Kellogg, just clash, right? And it made for an awesome day of hoops at its finest. And, of course, Kentucky gets the win, and really it's all thanks to, at the very end of the game, West Virginia guard Gia Cook. She shakes Tiani Key, right? I don't know if Tiani Key trips or what, but she shook Tiani Key and had an open look, I think basically from the left elbow, and fires it, and it just bounces around the rim, hangs up there, falls off. Tiani Key gets the rebound, and that's the game, right? Also, I know at the very end of the game, because there was like 0.2 seconds and they had to inbound the ball, the only way West Virginia was going to be able to do anything there, down one, was if Kentucky fouled on the inbounds. And that ref blew the whistle, and I swore I almost like flipped the media table. I thought it was a foul. I thought she just cheated Kentucky out of the Sweet 16. I thought she was about to say foul on 13 or whoever, and I was about to lose it. But it didn't happen. She was like, game over, and that was that. Just the significance of the game. So, obviously, we talked about, you know, Kentucky makes its first Sweet 16 in a decade, since 2016. And, you know, I find it really special because I like to go back and think about just my time covering the team, and that only extends back to Kyra Elsie's last season, so the last 3 seasons of Kentucky women's basketball. And you just think about the spot Kentucky was in with Kyra in that last year, where you lose to South Carolina by 50 points. And every game against a halfway decent team, not even the great teams like Texas coming up or West Virginia you just played, the halfway decent teams, like your Mississippi States of the world, like you get blown out, right? I think they actually did beat Mississippi State that year, but you get my point. Like Kentucky, you know, they lost to Austin freaking P my first year covering the beat. They were losing to, granted, a much better Florida Gulf Coast team, but they lost to freaking Florida Gulf Coast, right? Like, I remember the Furman game and the Samford game where I was like, man, Kentucky won those games. Kyra did a good job there. And it's like, what? Like, that's your basic non-con game. You should win by 40. But it's just a salute to what Kenny and the staff and the players have really done over these last 2 years. And I think the big thing about making a Sweet 16, and someone pointed this out on KS Board at the time of the game, you know, it truly, to me, does signal an upward trajectory for the program. And obviously, I think we all knew, you know, again, Kyra Elsie won 24 games combined in her last 2 seasons at Kentucky. Kenny Brooks won 23 games his first year, and right now is at 25, right? So I think obviously just from that standpoint, you can see, oh, hey, Kentucky women's basketball is doing a bit better than it was with Kyra, right? With Kenny at the helm, they seem to be doing pretty all right. But even if you just want to microdose that even more and you want to look at what Kenny Brooks has done, okay, year one, you know, it's pretty simple. Look, it's round of 32 last year, and kind of like Gia Cook and that West Virginia team, year one, Georgia Amor floater bouncing around the rim and off from going to the Sweet 16. And this year, you do make it to the Sweet 16. So you advance another round, at least so far. Of course, we'll have to see how this Texas game plays out. But, you know, you advance a round further and you really think to yourself, okay, like Kenny Brooks, he's not just better than Kyra, because that standard was pretty low, to be honest. But he is building Kentucky women's basketball up really to what Matthew Mitchell had in his early years at Kentucky, where Kentucky went to, I think it's 3 Elite Eights in 4 years, right? So I think with this Kentucky team, you are seeing the progress. You are seeing how Kenny was, you know, even if you lose Georgia Amor, right? Kenny Brooks is able to retain some talent like Tiani Key, Amelia Hassett, Clara Strack, and bring in some new talent like Tony Morgan, Asia Boone, Kaylin Carroll, who can all contribute and make Kentucky a better team. And this all goes without saying. Next year, Kentucky has Asia Boone and Clara Strack coming back. I'm looking at a poster of the team right above me. Dom Perova will be back, Kaylin Carroll, Lexi Blue. I don't know if she'll be back, but she definitely could be back. Right? Like there are a number of kids on this team who can come back and provide that foundation again that you kind of need. Of course, Kenny's gonna have to hit the portal some, like we know that. But it's like he told me after they beat West Virginia. Like you think about where the program is at, like I think the words he said are the trajectory of Kentucky women's basketball is moving up. It's pointing forward. And like he said, they've got 3 McDonald's All-Americans coming in. And when you break down those 3, Madden Greenway to me is, coin toss best point guard in the class other than Kate Harpering, who's going to North Carolina. Right? I think it's pretty darn close, and of course I'll be biased to Madden. You have Savvy Swords, who is another top 10 recruit, top 10, top 15, depending on who you ask. I would, again, bias say closer to top 10, who is a great shooter, pretty good athlete, I would say, for the most part. And Emily McDonald, who flew under the radar for so long, and then over the last 6 to 12 months, really, has kind of emerged as one of the more up-and-coming better kids in the 2026 class. And, just when South Carolina thought they'd be able to get her late, you went and got her, right? So just an incredible job on the recruiting aspect, but everything about Kentucky women's basketball, and especially this win over West Virginia, to me signals, hey, we are on that upward trajectory, truly. So, Kentucky against the Mountaineers, I think they did the best, obviously, and you kind of figured this would be the case, considering, who they were playing, how the size advantage Kentucky had, right? Kentucky out-rebounded West Virginia 39-23, and you could easily go point at turnovers and say, Phoenix, there's reason for concern. Kentucky had 17 turnovers to West Virginia's 8. I don't disagree that the turnovers are a little bit concerning, where they, you probably want to cut that down, but that's also West Virginia's game. Like, that is their whole thing defensively. When a team presses like that, like they're trying to force turnovers, and, they did a good job in doing that. I want to give a quick shout to this comment by Kay Nicholson 1, saying all the top coaches took years to get their programs to where they're at right now. It takes longer to do that than it does on the men's side. And that's true, because I think the number one thing in women's basketball is that it's taking longer for programs to invest in their schools. Kentucky, was pretty quick to jump on that investing boat, right? Of course, people love to, either love or hate. A bit more hatred, it sounds like, from Mitch Barnhart. But, the reality is he invested in Kentucky women's basketball. One, obviously, in the new facility of historic Memorial Coliseum, or at least renovated. I shouldn't say new, right? Build's been there, for 4 generations of my family now or whatever. But, he invested in the NIL, getting good coaches, things like that. Excuse me. And, that is why Kentucky is making this upward trajectory. And like you said, it does take longer than it does on the men's side, And the thing with women's basketball is, I don't know if the parity is still totally there yet. Like, the case that it was a decade ago is the case right now, where UConn's undefeated, they're the favorite to win the title, right? That hasn't changed, right? But there is this sense of, which is funny because UConn was just murdering Syracuse. Did you all see that halftime score, by the way? 65-12, I think it was at the half of that UConn-Syracuse game. Like, UConn is not the best example to use for this, but just in general, there is more parity in women's basketball, right? And we're not there yet to where we can say, every year you could say there's 10 teams that can win the title. You can't really say that yet. Like, you have your 3 or 4 that are going to win it, most likely. But there is, I think a great example using UConn is earlier in this season, they played Michigan, and it was a 3-point game, right? 72-69, where Michigan is, I think, the number 6 or 7 team in the country. And, they give UConn hell. Like, they fight tooth and nail with UConn. And, like, something goes differently, Michigan wins that game, right? UConn, again, Gino Auriemma has built his own standard up there in Storrs, Connecticut. But at the same time, I do think there's more parity, and I do think, with NIL and all these things, coaches can succeed faster, but you're absolutely right. It does take a little bit longer to do so on the women's side, which is, again, all the more reason why it's been so impressive just to kind of see what Kenny Brooks has done in his first 2 years here. I want to give a quick shout to West Virginia's Sydney Shaw, by the way, who, alongside Gia Cook, both of them had 23 points. But Sydney Shaw shot West Virginia back into that game. She went 6 of 11 from the three-point line. And, as a team, West Virginia was only 9 of 20, right? And she made 6 of those threes. I believe it was Tony Morgan after the game. I can't remember who. I want to say it was Tony, who was talking about, dude, it was so loud in that arena, we couldn't communicate defensively, and, like, Amelia Hassett, like, couldn't get a switch or whatever, and that had Shaw open. And I just thought it was interesting because, like, you saw the loud environment come into play. You saw how that worked out. But, again, I think it's all the more impressive Kentucky pulled it out. Something that surprised me, and I don't know if surprise is the word, but you just go look at the box score. I don't know if you really think about it in this light, but Tiani Key was the leading scorer, and she did a really good job. You could tell when Tiani Key was in for that West Virginia game, and I hate to say this because I love her to death, but Jordan Obi, like, you could see the difference when Tiani Key was in and when Jordan Obi wasn't. And I don't think it's because Jordan Obi's bad or anything like that, but it's just not her. It just wasn't a good matchup for her. Right? She's much more undersized compared to Tiani Key. Maybe not as athletic, certainly not as long. So, it's just harder for Jordan really to get going. And I say that, she was still 2 for 2 from the field, 4 points. But overall, she couldn't make as much of an impact on the game as Tiani did, who had 19 points on 9 of 14 shooting and 10 rebounds on the game. You could argue, Tiani, I think, did win Kentucky the game. Obviously, her 10th rebound of the game, that game-sealing, Sweet 16 sealing rebound, I think won Kentucky the game, obviously. But she just played her heart out. Right? Clara Strack puts up another just monster stat line of 18 points, 8 of 14 shooting from the field, 15 rebounds, and how about 4 blocks for Clara Strack? She had 10 defensive rebounds and 5 on the offensive end. Kentucky had 12 offensive rebounds as a team, compared to West Virginia's 6. So again, the size does come into play here, right? And then just going down the Kentucky box score, Tony Morgan had 15 points, only 3 assists to 4 turnovers. I think West Virginia did a good job for the most part hounding her. Again, like I said, their point guard, Jordan Harrison, finalist for National Player of the Year, so that kind of makes sense. Even though Tony, she had 15 points. She went 9 of 10 from the free throw line, so she made that count when she got there. And then Amelia Hassett had 9 points, hit 2 threes, and had 6 rebounds. But Asia Boone, I thought it was really interesting. Kenny Brooks was talking about her, and Kenny made a good point about how, hey, Asia Boone, coming out of halftime when Kentucky goes on that 9-0 run, which, by the way, I do think was kind of the separator that gave them just enough cushion that was too much for West Virginia to fight back for. Kentucky goes on that 9-0 run to start the third quarter. Asia Boone hits 3 threes, right? And holds West Virginia's guards to 3 of 12 shooting in the third quarter. Like, the way she played in the third quarter, there's a lot of reasons you could argue why whoever won and whoever lost, but Asia Boone, she did a very big role in Kentucky winning that game. I know she fouled out right at the end of the game, but 9 points, again, made 3 threes, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Asia Boone did a very good job of, doing just enough offensively and, of course, defensively as well to, again, cement her role as a very, very valuable piece on this team, especially heading into, these final few games in the season, right here in the NCAA tournament. I thought it was interesting because Kenny Brooks, he was like, he compared her to a pitcher throwing a no-hitter, right? Of course, I think about her. She's a San Diego native doing her best Joe Musgrove or Dylan Cease out there, the only two Padres to throw no-hitters in franchise history, right? Just he said she had a look in her eye, and, that's the kind of laser focus, personally, I just kind of love to see, and I thought it was really interesting to hear Kenny Brooks kind of make that point. But at the end of the day, it was just, it was a hard-fought win, and I think it kind of goes to show, first of all, if Kentucky played in any other conference in America, Kentucky wins the conference. And I might even give you the ACC, but at worst, Kentucky finishes second and Duke finishes first, right? Maybe, if you include the Tiani Key injury, maybe they go third behind Louisville. But, other than that, man, Kentucky wins every conference in America, right? Because I would assume night in, night out, they'd be able to beat West Virginia by more than one, just kind of watching that game. So, again, the sentiment I've said really for the last, 2 months rings true right now yet again, which is Kentucky is playing like a top 10 team in the country. West Virginia, I believe, is ranked number 11 in the last AP poll of the year. Kentucky goes beat them on the road. So you tell me where that kind of puts Kentucky. And something else that someone brought up on the message board, which I kind of want to bring up real quick. They asked me, Phoenix, thinking about next year's roster and really years down the line, with the way we've watched this team, is it going to be important? Is Kenny Brooks going to keep going after a 6'5" Tiani Key, a 6 foot? Is Kenny Brooks, basically the question was, is Kenny Brooks okay with sacrificing a little bit of size, right? Can we go maybe instead of 6'4", 6'5", and 6'5", can you be 6'3", 6'4", and 6'5", or 6'3", 6'3", and 6'4", or whatever, right? Can you sacrifice a little size if that means instead of shooting, 29, 30, 31% from the field, or from three as a team, you shoot closer to 35 or 36%? Is that a sacrifice Kenny Brooks can make, you think? And I'll be honest, I kind of left myself juggling in my hands here, I don't know, right? And I personally, after thinking about it, I think Kenny Brooks now at this point, after the success he's had with this year's team, and this is something I'll try to ask him after the season, if we all remember and we can pull it off. I think Kenny Brooks, the way after he's seen this season gone, how Kentucky has managed to get by if they have a bad shooting night, if they can be elite defensively and get, more rebounds than everybody else, I think Kenny Brooks personally is not really going to want to sacrifice, having a 6'5" and 6'5" twin towers down low when, because anyone can go cold from three, right? You can get the best shooters, they could go cold. And I think Kenny has just seen this year, hey, we've made it work. We thought we were going to be a better three-point shooting team than we were, which is kind of crazy because I'm pretty sure they just passed the program record for threes made in a season. But I think, heading from the summer into the fall and then, the season, I think Kenny Brooks kind of thought, well, we're going to be a little bit better than that. And I think it's just interesting that I don't know if they totally were. I think you got lucky because Amelia Hess and Asia Boone are basically trading right now for who's going to be the best three-point shooting season in history, program history. But, as a team, I just don't know. Jordan Obi hasn't been quite the shooter. I know Tony's three-point percentage was super high for a while, but the volume wasn't. So I think Kenny, I think this might be a model we can continue to expect. And it'll be interesting because you can already see, the high school recruiting class does not have that size, right? Madden Greenway is 5'8". I want to say Savvy Swords is 6'1", and I want to say Emily McDonald is 6 foot. So, maybe Kenny does kind of go back to that smaller, better shooting lineup. But I also tend to wonder, well, is he going to go in the portal and get that size he missed out in this class? I just think it'll be interesting to kind of see and monitor because, again, you just don't really know, right? You don't really, We won't know until he goes and gets the roster here in a couple months, or I guess a month-ish, right? So, again, it'll be fun to see, but I think the good thing with Kentucky women's basketball right now, especially this year's team, they kind of have both in a way, because like I said, Asia and Amelia are firing on all cylinders, it seems like, for the most part. Again, they're both chasing that single-season three-point record. And Kentucky, of course, with Tiani Key and the triplets down low, they've got that size. So, want to give a quick shout to our friends over at Rollback for sponsoring today's episode, as they have all season long. You can change the game with Rollback, a proud partner of KSR. Get the best feel. I read that wrong. Get the best fit and feel. Fit, feel. It's the best no matter what. With their incredibly comfortable activewear, from polos and quarter zips to shorts and Delta performance pants, you will look good and feel good. With Rollback, use promo code KSR for 20% off your first purchase at rollback.com. See, that's what's so great about Rollback. Best feel, best fit. It's the best of everything. It's Rollback. Doesn't get much better than 20% off your first purchase at rollback.com. Now, Kentucky has to play Texas, okay? It's what we've been staring at ever since the bracket came out on Selection Sunday. Number 1 seed Texas, number 3 overall seed, but 1 seed Texas sitting there, and you look at the bracket, and you think to yourself, well, great, how does Kentucky beat Texas? Okay, there's the obvious disadvantage already, right? We haven't even tipped the ball yet, but we already know, okay, Phoenix, where is this game being played at? Oh, well, Texas isn't hosting. We're at the Sweet 16. That's all right. We got a neutral site game. Oh, wait, but where is that neutral site game? It's in Fort Worth. It's in the state. It's still in Texas. So it's going to be more of a home game for Texas, obviously, than you would love it to be. However, I think if you're Kentucky right now, you kind of use that as an opportunity to say, hey, we've already played Texas on the road. We've been there. We did that. All right, we ain't scared of doing that this time around. And let me tell you, that Texas game the first time around, Kentucky loses 64-53. But if you'll remember and you call back to that game, that was a 1-point game with 4 to 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter before Texas kind of stretched things out and ended up pulling away. So I think if you're Kentucky, the main thing here, how do we prevent that run? How do we say, instead of being there with 4 minutes left, how are we there with 4 seconds left? Or hopefully, how are we the ones that stretch it out with 4 minutes left, right? How do we end up being up double digits as the clocks hit 000? So I think the number one thing for Kentucky, if you go look at that box score from that Texas game originally, okay, you did a good job of out-rebounding Texas. 30-29 was the final out-rebound right there. You have to keep doing that. Texas, I know you're a bit taller than they are, but they've got Kyla Oldacre. They've got some size. Even their guards, well, not Rory Harmon. She's tiny. But their guards outside of Rory, like they have some size. They can go rebound, right? Texas, obviously, a very physical defensive team. I would say the other thing, which, again, reason I think to have concern after that West Virginia game to a degree, Kentucky turned the ball over 23 times against Texas the first time around. That can't happen again, okay? So I go look at the box score and then kind of how the quarters went. Texas got up to a 23-19 lead after the first quarter, which you can live with that. If you were down 4 at the end of the first quarter against Texas, you'll survive. You'll be okay. But then you can't only score 9 points in the second quarter, right? If you're able to score 19 points again, you're tied at half. And then that second half is a completely different game. So again, Kentucky, they did outscore Texas 13-10 in the third quarter. But I think it was that second quarter where Kentucky went I think they went scoreless for 7 minutes. Okay, you can't do that again, right? The Longhorns, they have Madison Booker. Shout out to Matt G saying horns down Phoenix. That's what I like. You know what? Who needs analysis when you can just say horns down and forget it all, right? But in all seriousness, the Longhorns, they know how to They know how to exploit the things you are bad at, right? I think a lot of teams, and rightfully so, really like to focus on what do we do well and what can we do to, kind of impose our strengths. I think Texas does a really good job of, okay, how can we not only, impose our will and build on those strengths, like I said, but, you turn the ball over a lot. If Amelia and Asia aren't hitting threes, who's hitting the threes? If we take Clara Streck out the game, what's your offense? If Texas can exploit those things, right? And I think a really big thing to keep up with this game again is going to be the point guard matchup, where you had last game Jordan Harrison and Tony Morgan. Okay, Tony Morgan probably didn't play to the degree she quite wanted to, right? She still had 15 points, and she did hit that shot. I can't remember if it was 2 free throws or a shot after thinking about it now, but she scored the 73 and 74th points of the game for Kentucky. So she put Kentucky over the edge there a little bit. But, Roy Harmon kind of ate her alive the first time around, right? Tony Morgan had 12 points, but it was 4 of 6 shooting, 4 of 10 shooting. And then she had 6 turnovers to 4 assists, right? Like, not the greatest game in the world from her. Justice Carlton for Texas had 17 points, 8 of 12 shooting. You need to limit Justice Carlton back down to at least, around her averages down there. Okay? Kentucky did a really good job, I think, on Madison Booker and Rory Harmon, who had 13 combined points. I don't know if you have to limit them to that again, especially Madison Booker. 8 points, 1 of 6 shooting from the field. Like, that might have been her worst performance of the season, right? And she's coming off a 40-point game against Oregon. But I would just say, try to do what you did the first time around with those two. But just know, you can't let either of them really go off, especially Booker. Jordan Lee had 13 points as well in 40 minutes of play. Things are going to go differently, right? Whoever wins this game is going to say, man, we did the good things right to pull through. Whoever loses that game is going to say, man, we just didn't adjust, and the game just went different, and, like all this, each team is going to have their reasons for why they won or lost, but at the end of the day for Kentucky, I think it's as simple as, rebound, limit turnovers, and then, again, this is like I was talking about, try to do what you do well, but, if you're Kenny Brooks and you're getting paid this money to, this is what you're getting paid to do, find what it is that Texas doesn't do well, right? There's not really a whole lot. They're 33-3 for a reason, right? They've won 10 games in a row. And just beat South Carolina by 17 in the SEC title game. There's not a lot that Texas doesn't really do well. But, okay, sometimes they get a little cold offensively. If Madison Booker isn't hitting shots, can we limit everybody else? Can we make sure Rory Harmon doesn't have an elite defensive game or doesn't go off offensively for whatever reason? Can we keep Kyla Oldacre and Bria Cunningham and these bigs? Can we keep them out of the game for the most part? Again, if you are Kentucky, I want to say it's simple, right? It's not a complicated path to a victory, but it is hard. You know what I mean? Like, something can be simple and hard, right? It's very simple to sit there and push a car up a hill, but that doesn't mean it's not hard, right? So if you're Kentucky, I think the key is use your size and mobility and your length to the advantage that you can, like you did against West Virginia, right? But at the same time, kind of just be ready, if someone does try to go off, okay, how do you punch back? Okay, I think the good thing about that West Virginia game, it almost was kind of gearing you up for this Texas game, right? It was kind of getting you ready. West Virginia, not to minimize what they did this season because they had a really great year and they're a good team, but they're almost, in a way, like the Walmart version of Texas. Like they're the B. They're like the B version of Texas. Okay, where Texas is the A+ version of themselves. If you're Kentucky, you just have to figure out what you did well against West Virginia, what you can apply to this Texas game. At the end of the day, I think Tony Morgan's got to play better. Okay, you probably need a better game, even from Clara Streck, who had 14 points, right? You probably need her to have a better game. Tiani Key, you probably need her to do better than 8 points, just being completely honest. Amelia Hassa definitely needs to do better than 3 points. She cannot only be taking 3 3-point shots. She needs to be, that number needs to be closer to 6, 7, or 8. Asia Boone, you had 16 points on 4 of 6 shooting from 3. Do that again. Okay? This isn't going to be a track meet of a game. I don't know if it really is ever going to be like that with Kentucky and Texas. I think if Kentucky's going to win, they'll almost kind of have to play the Texas game a little bit, and it's going to have to be a kind of similar score to what we saw last time. So if I'm going to sit here and try to predict a score, which, again, I normally write these down. I need to start doing that again. But, I think Texas, if I'm just being honest, I do think Texas wins. And I'll say 68-55. Okay? But if you're Kentucky, you can find the little things you can attack. Like, again, Texas is a little bit smaller. They aren't as good of an offensive team, right? Even though they do you go look at Texas, I say that. You go look at the stats. They do average 85 points a game. But there are things about their game offensively that you can exploit. Okay? It's going to be pretty tough defensively, but you know what? You're tough too. So I think they can kind of pick up on the things they've done the first time against Texas in the West Virginia game, and there's no reason why Kentucky can't win. And what's crazy, man, if you beat Texas, you're either playing Michigan or Louisville in the in the Elite Eight. If you're playing them, like, that is a more winnable game than Texas. Like, your Elite Eight game is going to be more winnable than this this Sweet 16 game. So I think if you're Kentucky, it's just a matter of really trying to do the things you do well against a team that does everything well. Like I said, I do think Texas wins, but there's no reason for us to go into that game not thinking they can win. So I'm Phoenix Stevens here on the KSR YouTube channel. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Again, I'm a little bit bummed I'm not going to be in Fort Worth, but you know what? Maybe, if Kentucky beats Texas, we can do something all together, right? Maybe we'll do a live version of the Memo. Not saying that for certain, but maybe. Who knows? We'll see if that can happen. So, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm Phoenix Stevens, again, here on the KSR YouTube channel. Like, comment, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. You tell me, what do you think Kentucky's going to do against Texas? Are the Cats going to pull it off and go to their 5th Elite Eight in program history, their first since 2013? Is Kentucky going to pull it off? What do you think? I want to know what your thoughts are. Again, do those things, like, comment, subscribe. I would appreciate it. Stephen Peak would appreciate it. All of us here at KSR would appreciate it. And until next time, as always, peace out and go Cats.